Hello, everybody. Good morning. Today it's me and Miss Jerry Jenkins.
Good morning.
David and Joe are both out. Miss Melody had to have some teeth surgery, and David and Sarah and the kids went to Williamsburg to go visit Sarah's family. And today, me and Miss Jerry are going to continue what we started last week about a servant's heart. And last week we talked about what a servant's heart is and what it means to us. And then this week I wanted to talk about what it means to you because you weren't with us last week. And then how we can use it in our church, our community, in our lives. And what is a servant's heart to you?
In my life, I have realized that my relationship with God and the examples of Jesus Christ through the scriptures, you have a desire to serve, and that's what He wants us to do. I think that's why He came. He came as a servant to teach us how to serve and how to honor God. And so He was always so humble, and He always would seek out those that we're not in high positions, we're not in authority, but those that were the least and the lost and the lonely. I think His disciples had a lot of times had a hard time of understanding this, and I think He saw that, and He would tell them on different occasions, if you want to be first, you have to be last.
Oh yeah.
And it was hard for them to understand that because they wanted Him to come in and be an authoritative, person who would release them from their bondage they felt. And so I think that to me, a servant's heart is you desire to serve because that's what you feel you should do, that to honor God and be obedient to Him, and that you don't do it for recognition. This, I think, is so important. You need to have humility. So you don't serve for recognition or for people to, notice you or for you to get anything in return.
Right.
You just do it because you love God and you love His people. And that's the way that you can show it. And I think about my walk, my Christian walk, and I was so blessed to have so many people in my life that had servants' hearts, especially my mother and my two grandmothers. And I didn't realize it until I was much older that they were so, full of Jesus' heart and love, that was just their way of life.
Yes, ma'am.
And they didn't have much at all. And my two grandmothers lost their husbands when they were in their 30s. And so they had, one had 3 children, one had 5. And they were all on their own. But they never complained. They never felt sorry for themselves. They never said, why did this happen to me? But they were always out in the community, taking food to people, visiting the sick. And I just saw that through them. And then my mother was the same way. I can't remember many times in her life when she wasn't there for others. So I was blessed with having the witnesses of 3 strong ladies in my life that were had such a servant's heart.
Yes, ma'am. And so that's one thing it's going to be a little off topic, but on topic. We look at our generations now and our generations of the past. If we'd actually, the generations of the present and the future would learn from what the generations of the past could teach us about, like being humble, being a servant. A lot of the kids nowadays, it's all about what can I get, what can I do, what is mine, everything, and they have this feeling that they deserve everything, and it kind of hurts the whole servant's heart because they don't know what a true servant's heart is. They don't know what it is to be humble and what it means to be like they were on their own. They struggled. I mean, that was back in that time period. It was hard for a woman to be on her own with 3 children. Because, I mean, not only did you have to work the house, you had to work, I'm guaranteeing they had farms.
Oh, yes.
So they worked farms. And 3 kids is a hard job, keeping up with 3 kids and a farm and a house, and
That's right.
and that'll make you humble. But our kids nowadays are given so much stuff that they're not taught what a humble heart is. They're not taught what it is to be like to have that humility.
Right.
And I agree with you that I had some strong ladies in my life too. My grandmother and my great grandmother. My great grandmother had 9 kids. She would have had 13 if they would have all survived. But they were from West Virginia, so they were farmers, coal miners. 9
Right.
kids, farm. I mean, they, like you were talking about, they had to make their own way because that was. But they not only made their own way, but they also served the community. Because my great grandmother, they had a church that our family built because there wasn't one in the area. They had a pastor come in, so they built a parsonage for the pastor, and this all came from the community. It wasn't, well, the church is going to do this. It's the community was the church. They came together and they wanted to work together for the good of God, so they could have that pastor. And that's been
Yeah.
instilled in my heart since I was a young child. Is number one, hard work, and your word is your bond.
Right.
And then being humble was another part because hard work makes you humble.
Yes, it does.
And being a servant of God, sometimes it seems hard,
Right.
but the humbleness is what keeps us going,
Right.
and the hope that we know we have a living Savior.
Right.
And I know that went a little off topic.
And then
I'm
you-
sorry.
Well, that's fine, and you referred to the church, and I think we have such an opportunity now, especially since we've been through all the COVID thing and everything. And I think we had a lot of opportunities then, which I saw a lot of our members doing, was having a servant's heart for those that needed someone to be there for them. And as much as they could during certain times of COVID with restrictions, but they were still there, by the phones, by messages, by cards, doing what they could.
Yes, ma'am.
And now, as some of it has been lifted, by visits and of shut-ins and calls and follow up with cards and just some way to share their love of Christ and their love of them. And I think this is a real opportunity for our church as we continue to come back to a more normal type of life, is to show others our servant's heart
Yes, ma'am.
and make them feel included and welcome and needed
Yes,
and wanted. And we all need to feel that way. But I think this is a real important time for us as servants of Christ to really witness and share our love for others
Yes, ma'am.
at a time when a lot of them are still hurting and a lot of them are still in grief from loss of loved ones.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
and there's just and it's not something great big that we would have to do, but just being there for them with your time and your love and your support.
Well, I want to bring up one of the ministries I know you're very active in, and that's the prayer ministry. To me, to do that, you have to have a servant's heart, because you have, with you, I know you stay busy with the prayer ministry because you send out all the emails that generate and populate out, and I'm sure you make phone calls too. But I know that you actually type a personal prayer with every single prayer request that we get. There's a personal prayer from you in the email. And to me, I had COVID back in June of last year. It was right around the time my mother-in-law passed away.
Right.
So we were locked down at the house, not able to go to the funeral service or anything. We watched it on Facebook because we couldn't leave the house. And we got cards, we had prayers, we had emails, and those personal prayers, that gives a piece of your heart and a piece of yourself to the people that you send it to. And Miss Legenia, I love her dearly. That lady has called me and sang happy birthday to me. She's called me and prayed with me. And she sent me cards before her handwriting got to where her hands started shaking. But she'll call and just talk to you. And to me, that's a servant's heart too, because even though she's not able to get out and go, she's not able to write anymore, she still uses her ability to spread God's word and message through showing His grace.
Absolutely. And I can tell you that she makes a lot of referrals for prayer herself.
Yes, ma'am.
And I get calls from her a lot. And but her ministry, she was a wonderful minister of love and care when she was in the church, with physically. But she still is doing her love for God and her feeling of having a servant's heart and serving God through still doing that.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
so in every way she can, you're right. She calls Ted and I and sings us happy birthday.
Yes, ma'am.
But then she also calls if she knows of anything, that we need to put out for the prayer warriors. And then if it's very long after I haven't sent an update, she'll call me about an update.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I'll try to find out, what's going on and update it. But yes, we have, thank goodness, we have people who don't ever forget that they have a servant's heart, and as long as they can, in whatever way they do. And I think that's wonderful. And it means a lot, like you said. It even means more when you know that someone is doing that with a limited ability to get out and around.
Yes, ma'am. And see, she could be depressed and say, I'm not doing anything, because she can't get out of the house. But she still takes that time to reach out to everyone. I mean, she reaches out to, like, people that I don't even know if she knows everybody she reaches out to. Miss Virginia knows a lot of folks in this town because
Right.
she grew up here.
Right.
But she'll reach out to people that she doesn't know anything know. She just knows that they need prayer or they need somebody to talk
Absolutely. That's true.
to. And
And she's a good example for us to follow.
yes,
Of
ma'am.
course, Jesus is our best example of a servant's heart.
Yes, ma'am.
And I loved the times when he would go and serve, and the disciples were just so confused. And I love the part when they got concerned about the children and they were afraid that they would interfere with his, and I remember he said, "Suffer the little children to come unto me, and forbid them not, for such is the kingdom of heaven." And I loved that example of his servant's heart, like, serve everyone. The little children are important too.
Yes, ma'am.
And then when he washed their feet, I think that was just a primary example of how he loved them so much, realized that they still didn't understand the servant's heart. And so to stoop down and to wash their feet was, of course, one of the lowest things you could do. And I think that was so a good example, not only for them, but for us.
Oh, yeah.
That was the example he gave as for a servant's heart, I think.
Okay. Well, this is going to sound a little weird too, but you talking about the servant's heart and how Christ put it forth. I look at some of these apostles that he went out and found fishermen in the boat and said, "Leave all your stuff and follow me." How many of us nowadays would, if Jesus Christ came up today and said, "Look, I want you to drop everything you own, and just follow me wherever I go"? Because they didn't know a whole lot about everything at that time. They were still new and learning. And he's like, "Well, I need you to follow me." How many of us would be like, "That dude's crazy. I ain't following him.
Right.
This is how I make my money." No. But that's what he wants us to do. Is not think about ourselves, but go out and follow him humbly. Because he'll make the way.
Right.
And we got to take ourselves out of it
Right.
and give it to him.
Not make all the excuses that we can think of, and then, or I'll get around to it later, and then sometimes we find out, unfortunately, that later is too late.
Right.
And then we say, "Oh, I wish I had of," So yes, that's something that we have to deal with daily in our servant's walk, I think.
Yes, ma'am. Because he'll put you in some places that you're like, "Man, I don't think I can do this." But if you pray to God and say, "Look, God, give me the peace and comfort to go in here," even though it's out of my comfort zone, just be with me. He's with you anyways, but just say, "Will you be with me and guide me?" And he'll guide you through and protect you.
Right.
And he might put you in places you might think, "Well, I don't know about this," but if you listen to what God's telling you, He's sending you to a place for a reason. And that's another part of our servant's heart, is to understand when God sends you somewhere. Like when Jesus sat with the tax collectors and Pharisees, they asked him, "Why are you sitting with them?" He's like, "Doesn't the sick need a physician?"
Right.
You know, the well don't need a physician;
Right.
the sick do.
Right.
And sometimes going out to the sick, meaning the lost or the broken, will put you in places you're like, "I don't know if I can do that or not."
You're absolutely correct. And then you'll wonder sometimes, what am I doing here?
Right.
And then if we'll just pause and trust and have the faith, and that's sometimes a hard thing to do, because you never expected that you would be where you are. And then, but I think that if we have the courage and the faith to do that it takes a while sometimes for us to understand how it worked out. But then we look back and we say, now I understand why I felt the need to go or to do or to be there.
Yes, ma'am. That's like with me with ministry. Back when I was a teenager, I was nowhere close to what I am now. I was wild and wild. We'll leave it at wild. And I didn't think, I went to church with my grandma, but I didn't think I'd ever get into doing anything with ministry. And then God kept nudging me and nudging me and nudging me, and then all of a sudden I feel this kick in the backside. It's like, you're not listening to what I'm saying. And then He pulled me in, and He's like, this is what I want you to do. And everything started falling in place for that ministry to happen. And I was like, God, I don't know. But then I turned it over to Him, and it's just a whole new world opened up.
Right.
And that's one thing with a lot of times we have people in our church who are like, well, I can't do this, I can't do this. There's something that we can do to be a servant, whether it be outreach, giving cards to people, talking to people, handing out, church flyers. Like we had a Karen Peck concert, which was awesome, by the way.
Right.
And, just being there to support that, support other ministries. It doesn't have to be financially. It could be, like we have Vacation Bible School. We had 10, 15 volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
Plus we had youth show up. And youth, during the summertime, they're like, nah, I'm going, I'm partying or whatever. Well, not all of them. Some of them actually still had level heads. And they still came and volunteered. They
Right.
gave a piece of themselves in time.
Right. And that was great for the children, I think, to be exposed to that age, youth, because I think they have a good influence on young children. And I was very proud of them for showing up and
Yes, ma'am.
participating every night.
And we ranged between 30 to 50 kids every night. And we had one of our youth, by the time the week was over, she's like, I don't know how y'all do this every year. I'm tired. But she's like, I had fun.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sometimes being a servant's not always about having fun, but it still makes us have a happy, joyful heart because we're helping the least, the last, and the lost and the broken.
Right. That's right.
Even if it's a person that goes to our church, that's been in our church for 50 years, they could have a part of them that's still hurting.
Right. Absolutely. We all have moments in our lives, unexpected moments, or moments of sadness, or loneliness, or we all have those things. And if we have the heart to be able to identify that and see a need, and I think that in our prayers, praying about being led to where the Lord wants us to be, what He wants us to do, how He wants us to serve.
Yes, ma'am.
It's really important because He will. I
Yes,
think He will.
And that's one thing I want to talk about too is, and this is something just kind of added on. I want to talk about some of our ministries we have in the church. We have the Prayer Warriors, which is an awesome, ministry. We have our Carpenters of Christ, which are all, like the Carpenters of Christ have done a lot of good.
Absolutely.
And to explain what it is, it's a group of guys from our church, and I'm guessing other churches too have joined in some. 'Cause they work with Greensboro to move a ramp.
Mm-hmm.
They go around and they've built handicap ramps, they've done repairs to people's houses,
Right.
and this is all from the goodness of their heart. They don't get any kind of financial compensation for any of it.
Absolutely.
They bring their own tools, or the supplies are donated. There's no, and it's an awesome like ministry. It's an
Right.
outreach. Then we have the Stevens ministry, which I want to see it come back,
Yes.
because
We're working on
It's
that.
been kind of dormant for a little
Right.
while. But then we have the UNW, which is another big awesome ministry. That y'all have 2 circles a day and a night circle,
Correct.
and y'all do a lot of community service too. And I guess that's part of y'all's mission too.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then we have the men's group, which is the UMM instead of
Right.
the UNW. It's UMM.
Right.
They do a lot of community stuff. That's where the Carpenters of Christ are based out of. And then we have the Prayer Shawl Ministry, which they make lap blankets for
Right.
People that are in need, or
Right.
I guess you'd say it's kind of a comfort blanket.
Right. And those are so appreciated. I've been to visit some of those ladies in the nursing home and that received those, and they just really felt so blessed, and they felt connected with our church, and with people that cared about them and for them, some that they didn't even know. And so yes, you're right, that all the different ways of reaching out, I think, are so important, that we not only continue to do them but grow them and add more to them.
Yes. Well, and that's one thing me and David talked about, Pastor David, during VBS. When I was in Texas with our youth group, we worked with like 5 or 6 different churches out there.
Right.
But one of the churches we went to was a Methodist church. It was a Hispanic Methodist church.
Mm-hmm.
But they spoke English and Hispanic, so they could translate.
Right.
Because that area of Dallas that we're in was actually mostly Hispanic.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a Hispanic church.
Right.
The church itself had a program called Project Transformation. And what they did was they had books that were donated or they
Right.
bought, and they had a teacher come in, or a librarian, and they figured out what books were for each age level.
Right.
And they'd have crates of books just sitting in the front. The children would come in, and I mean, they had anywhere between 20 to 80 kids on a given day.
Wow.
And
That's
we were there
great.
for a week.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was, we saw 80 kids one day.
Wow.
And they go there and they pick a book, they come back and sit on a pew, and they have a person sit with them,
Uh-huh.
or a group of them. I had 5
Right.
because we had so many kids that day. But you sit down, and we had our youth out there, which was awesome, because they're like, we never knew that there were that many kids that could not read. But what it was is the kids read to us.
Mm-hmm.
If they had trouble reading the word, we'd help them with the word. Or we had some that they were like super young.
Right.
We would actually, they had color books that had like pictures, and
Right.
you teach them shapes and
Right.
numbers, and because they didn't care what age you were, as long as
Right. That's a great ministry.
And that's one thing I want to get started here, because we have so many kids that it would help.
Yes.
And to me, that would be an awesome ministry. But we're serving community that's not being reached
Right.
by
Right.
because that a lot of kids that are like lower class, or I hate to say, I hate to use the class levels,
Right.
but you have some that are either behind in reading because they're not able to have that advantage of
Right.
buying books, and we have first readers, which is awesome.
Yes, it
that
is.
we work with, and they send out books to kids, and our church has helped out a lot with that too, from what I understand.
Right.
And they send out, I think, 1,000 books to kids in Putnam County, and those people, from what I understand, get no financial
Right.
they don't get paid to do it.
Right. They get
They do it.
donations from people to buy the books.
Right, and they do it because of the goodness of their heart, and God led them to it.
Yes.
And it's just those ministries like that are what a servant's heart is.
Yeah. So then they can read the Bible
Yes, ma'am.
and read other things that are important.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that one. And I think we're about to have to close it down because it's at 26 minutes.
Okay.
But if y'all have any kind of questions or comments, just let us know. And I want to thank Miss Jerry for coming.
And thank you for inviting me.
Well, you're very welcome. Because what we're wanting to do is get more of the church people involved in the podcast.
Right.
That way it's just not me, Joe, and David up here doing the podcast.
Right.
And that way we can have everybody involved.
Right. But I think the servant's heart is such a good topic, because I think that so many of us could attest to the fact. I know me, all during my Christian walk, people who just appeared out of nowhere, people that, and it was not always big things, it was small things, but were the best witnesses to me with the Christian faith. No matter what it was that they were doing, they were there with love and support and understanding. And I think that's so important to everyone, that we have that idea of reaching out and touching others, and with Christ in mind.
Yes, ma'am. And as we close up, I want to just let everybody know, no matter what you feel about if you can't serve or not, if you feel there's not a place for you to serve, come find one of us, because we will guide you to the place where you can serve.
Absolutely.
Because there's a place for everybody, even if it's just prayer, writing cards, or just outreach.
Absolutely.
So, y'all have a great day, and thank y'all for joining us.